The Wreck of Sybellen. December 25th, 1861. It is Christmas, and my enterprising son has taken it upon himself to gift me with a beautiful leather book full of empty pages. It also came with a red satin ribbon with which to wrap it closed. I am not certain what to do with it, as I am no artist or poet. What a laundry woman can hope to render into these pages that may be worthy of viewing when she has long since passed, I lack the imagination to know. "Fill it with your thoughts, Mamma," said Mattis when I asked him what his intention was by giving me such a pretty thing. So as not to disappoint my son, who patiently taught me to read and to write when he was young himself, I shall resolve to document a simple woman's hopes and thoughts. I have no delusions that a diary can ever remain private, and so I shall write to you, dear reader, and imagine that you may be a distant descendant of mine, or perhaps have come across this diary by happenstance a century after I have turned to dust. By way of introduction, you may know me as Aleksandra Iga Novak, wife to Emun Mattis Novak and mother to Mattis, whom I shall write more of in a moment. Iga for my mother, may God rest her soul, and Aleksandra, as many a woman before me have been called in these parts. I shall not admit that for years I detested my name because it was so common, for I am a good Christian woman with much to be grateful for. My husband and I have one child, and we have now arrived at my favorite subject. I had to stop myself from saying only one child, lest you think me greedy. But in the spirit of honesty, I can admit to you, a stranger, that in my secret heart I had wished for a house bursting with children. But such things were not to be, and I was told by good Dr. Wozniak, after a thorough inspection of my person, that Mattis alone was a miracle. And so we have Mattis, our son, and what a son to have been given. I can hardly understand that he has come from myself in Emun. Even as a boy he showed superior intellect and understanding. Forgive me my boastful words, but I will be honest within these pages or write not at all. Perhaps all mothers feel such a way, but truly, even if I were an outsider looking in, I should be in awe of the young man Mattis. For at the tender age of 17 he displayed a faculty for business unlike any in his family before him. He began his own newspaper before even finishing his studies, and saved every penny he earned to pour into the shipping business he now runs. I admit freely that his ambitions frighten me at times, for even now he is shouldering responsibilities that neither I nor Emun would ever dream to undertake. Mattis informs me with all sincerity that one day I shall be the lady of a great house, and while I must bite my tongue to keep from laughing at such predictions, there is a corner of my heart that believes that if anyone can bring such a dream into reality, it is my son. I have watched him with pride, and sometimes outright shock at the consistency with which he seems able to realize his ambitions. When Mattis returned from his last shipping commission, a job that took him all the way to a place called the West Indies, where the spice trade is booming, it was the longest journey he had ever made, and we missed him horribly. He shocked both Emun and me by returning with a wife. In Sybellen, my son could not have found a wife with stranger habits or a more secretive past. The girl is beautiful, to be sure, but has failed to provide a history for herself and seems hesitant to speak more than a few sentences to anyone but Mattis himself. I'm thankful that in the least she seems to be as eager for a baby as I am for a grandchild. Mattis had not so much as written to warn us of her existence before he arrived with her by his side, but what could we do but welcome her into our home and our family? Sometimes the decisions that shape our lives are stolen away from us by our own loved ones. I imagine that had I a diary at the time of her arrival, my entry regarding her appearance in our lives would not have read so serenely. However, I have moved into acceptance, and the four of us live relatively peaceably together in our small house by the sea. Perhaps, given our close quarters, I should be grateful for a daughter-in-law who rarely speaks, instead of one who does not know how to be silent. But this is the closing of our Christmas day, and the light grows dim. Although Mattis tells me we are to no longer worry about wasting candles, old habits remain alive in me, and I hesitate to light one. So for now I shall say good night and Happy Christmas. I shall meet you here again when something is worth writing about. I have my doubts as to what that might possibly be, for my life is as constant as the rain on a March day. Look at that. Perhaps there is some small poet in me after all. Do not be surprised if this is my first and last entry. Perhaps the pages after this one shall be filled with scribbles of my grandchildren. January 17th, 1862. Well, my dear reader, I told you that I shall write when something of worth is to be saying, and I can hardly think of a day that is more worthy of remembrance than this one. Perhaps only my wedding day and the birth of my son can rival the news I am about to share. Today is Matta's 27th birthday, and while that is a happy occasion, it is not what makes this day worthy of dripping ink onto this empty page. Mattis and his wife Sybellen have reported that they are to have a child. When I look at the words written down on the page, I am dissatisfied they cannot portray the gladness in my heart. Sybellen, whom I have not introduced to you in full detail yet, it may take me some time to work out how I am to properly describe her, since a more perplexing creature with a stranger name I have yet to meet, is the happiest that I have ever seen her. And for the first time since she came so mysteriously into our lives, she has given me a proper hug and a kiss on each cheek. I almost fell over, and Emun, whose eyebrows are growing bushier by the day, gave such an expression of surprise when she did that, it confirmed for me that her lack of affection had not gone unnoticed by him either. In my private thoughts, I hope that her condition means that she'll stop swimming in the ocean so much as she has. She's made a habit of rising early every morning and swimming for stretches of time that go beyond my comprehension. Even before the sun rises at times, I hear her leave through our front door and she does not return for several hours. What any person can hope to gain from so many hours in or by the sea is beyond me. I've given up asking Mattis to explain her habits, as it appears he thinks it's good for her health, and she can do no wrong besides. One oddity I shall report is that I asked Mattis when Sybellen had seen Dr. Wozniak, for I didn't remember her setting or attending the appointment. He shocked me by answering that she had not seen the doctor at all. When I asked how she knew she was pregnant, he replied, as though it was an everyday occurrence that a woman diagnose her own state, that she just knew. I have asked him to please ensure she has the doctor confirm it, for what a disappointment it would prove to be if she were mistaken. Mattis gave me the look that tells me I have overreached myself. Oh, how I have come to hate that look. And so I silenced myself. For the time being, I shall work to not be the meddling mother-in-law that I myself had to contend with, and shall content myself with happy thoughts of an addition to our little family. I take much pleasure in thinking of what delicate little handmade thing I can concoct for my future grandchild, and Emun has already taken to calling the wee one a lad. Only time shall tell, and as best we know, or as near as Sybellen can tell us at this time, would that I had the gift of prediction that my daughter-in-law has, that the time to meet the babe shall be this autumn. August 30th, 1862. Another day worthy of note has passed, and I sit and write this sometime around midnight because I am far too energized to sleep. Dr. Wozniak was here today to examine Sybellen and report on her progress. She is growing very large, and I've been blessed with occasion to feel the movements through her belly. Dr. Wozniak spent considerable time examining her with his hands, and with a remarkable device he's acquired from France called a stethoscope, through which he was able to hear the heartbeats of 2 babies. So it seems that all is better than well because she is to have twins. This old heart of mine can hardly handle such a surprise, for never before in either the Novak family or the Calf, my maiden name, family, have twins occurred. Mattis was overjoyed to hear that they are to have not one but 2 babies, but Sybellen looked not surprised in the least. Perhaps she could tell, but never said. She did, however, surprise us all by asking the doctor if he was able to tell the sex of the children, as apparently this is one factor that was beyond her. To his credit, Dr. Wozniak told her he had his suspicions, but that there was no exact science to learning a child's sex for certain while still in the womb, so he wouldn't venture to say. In a private moment just before our good doctor was to leave, I asked him if swimming in the ocean might be a poor practice for a pregnant woman. He surprised me that, by saying if the water was warm enough, that it might even do her some good, although he has colleagues that he knew would disagree with him. These August days are hot, and I must admit that even I have been tempted to frequent the shore a time or two to enjoy the delicious coolness that comes off the water. So I shall bite my tongue for the time being, as it seems the doctor does not find it dangerous. But I'm in wonderment at her constancy and loyalty to her daily exercise. Most women I know take extra care and rest during these days of pregnancy, but not Sybellen. Perhaps now I should put down on paper, since I find I have the energy to write, that Sybellen is a woman of the unexplained. Mattis, since running his growing shipping service, has taken to being away for long stretches at a time. On his last journey, I forget if I have told you this, forgive an old woman her mind, he returned to us in the fall of 1861, already wed to the beautiful Sybellen. Upon meeting her, I remember thinking that I had never seen such a beautiful girl. Skin like porcelain, bright azure eyes and midnight black hair. However, it is not her beauty that truly sets Sybellen apart, but rather her behaviors and passions, or more precisely, her lack thereof. From the very beginning, she has given us none of her story. Despite questioning about her place of origin, her family, her education, and any of the normal items of interest one should like to know about the woman who marries into her family, she has remained silent. Sybellen has never once satisfied our curiosity about any aspect of herself. Indeed, she seems content to say as little as possible, even in the fleeting moments she remains in the company of Emun and me. I do not wish to give you the impression that she is unfriendly or rude, for when we do see her, she is polite and respectful. There is even a warmth about her at times, but I get the sensation that her only wish is to be around Mattis. This is heartbreaking for simple people such as ourselves who dreamt of an ever-expanding and close-knit family. The woman our son has chosen simply does not make this possible. I have spoken to Mattis about these things when I have had the chance, but I hesitate to continue in this vein. He can become sharp with me and makes me feel like the nosy mother-in-law that I promised myself I would never be. The most I could glean from him is that they met on a small island in the West Indies when he had to make a delivery there, and they knew at once that they were to be together always. They were a many months' journey away from home at this time, which was the reason they were married away from home. Mattis has described the people of the West Indies as warm, full of life, and dark-skinned from the sun. But Sybellen is none of these things. But what does a barely educated elderly washerwoman know about such things? I have never set foot outside my own village, and cannot even imagine the worlds that my son sees while abroad. My, hopefully, now extensive vocabulary is a benefit of having such a worldly son, but my ambitions stop there. Indeed, at one time I wouldn't have dreamed of filling empty pages with my own words. September 15th, 1862. As the day draws nearer when I am to meet my 2 grandchildren, the summer seems ever more beautiful to my aging eyes. My daughter-in-law is by far the largest pregnant woman I have ever seen, and Emun has wondered out loud more than once that the doctor might have been mistaken and that she is to have triplets. He jests, but our Sybellen does display a belly that could provide accommodation for 3. Indeed, Sybellen is roughly the size of a house. Luckily, she is also the tallest woman for miles. Mattis thankfully surpassed his own father's height, or he should feel unmanned by his wife. So she can bear such belly. The good doctor says to expect the babes at the end of the month, which is only 2 weeks away, and so preparations have already begun. Sybellen has honored me greatly by requesting that I attend her at the birth. She also accepted my suggestion to use the same midwife, Anna, who was of great help to me at the birth of Mattis. Dr. Wozniak humbly admitted that Anna is better educated than even he in matters of childbirth. I choose to see Sybellen's request as a sign of good faith in me, and not as evidence that she knows not a soul in the village, and certainly not any good midwife. September 16th, 1862. You'll see from the dates that I wrote only yesterday. Such frequent entries are not a habit of mine, but I'm so agog at the happenings from today that I simply must record them for fear that I'll wake up tomorrow and think that they were simply a daytime fantasy of mine. Today is Sunday, and as always, Emon and I attended Mass. Sybellen never attends with us unless Mattis is home, and he's currently still away, so we left Sybellen to the privacy of her mourning. When we were returning from service, we noticed as we approached the yard that our front door was ajar. We looked around for Sybellen, but she was nowhere to be found. Just as we were inspecting the contents of the house to be sure there was no stranger inside or some accident, my heart has rarely pounded so hard as when sneaking into my own dark home afeard of what might be inside. We saw that the bathing tub had been set up near the fireplace and was half full of steaming water. The house had taken on the odor of seaweed. Upon leaving the house with this strange scene, we came upon an even stranger one. Sybellen walking up the long path from the ocean, carrying our yoke with 2 of our largest water buckets full and affixed to the chains. She was walking up the steep path and under this formidable burden, with her belly protruding out in front of her like the prow of a ship, seemingly without any effort at all. Emon nearly tripped over himself in his rush down the path to aid her. As he approached, she had the decency to look sheepish, though I'm convinced she was not regretful of her foolish behavior, but simply embarrassed at having been caught in it. As I watched breathlessly from the top of the path with sharp words on my tongue for the risk she had taken in her condition, she set the water buckets down and allowed Emon to take them from her. Nearly half of the water sloshed out due to the slope of the earth. I was relieved to see her meet with her senses again, but my shock was to be far from over. My darling husband is not as young as he used to be, and as I watched his noble effort, I could see clearly that he quivered and bowed under the weight of such a burden. The buckets merely shook and spilled more of their contents into the sandy soil. I was shocked speechless to see that Sybellen also witnessed his strain and immediately begged him to put the yoke down. He did so, but it was not because she asked, but rather that his legs and back were not hale enough. Sybellen's face expressed such concern to see him bow under the yoke, and for a moment all my anger vanished and my heart swelled with love for her. Before Emon could catch his breath, she shouldered the burden once more and strolled up the remaining way as though she were carrying no more than a knitted shawl across her shoulders. She greeted me with a nod and a mama as I stood there with my mouth agape. I was not delicate, for I can tell you I have not had such a shock in my life before, and entered the cottage to dump the buckets into the large iron pot over our fire to heat. Emon and I were too surprised at her to speak, and it wasn't until later this evening that I asked her why she chose to fix herself such a bath. Surely the well water would have been suitable? Surely she could have waited until Mattis was home and given him the task? She answered that the seawater eased the aching in her hips and kept her strong. Furthermore, she needn't bother Mattis for such help when she was capable of doing it easily on her own. For the 100th time, I found my imagination full with wonderings of what a strange people my daughter-in-law must have come from. If that wasn't such a shock for me, imagine my surprise when my own darling Emun elected to take a bath in the tepid seawater once she was finished. I had merely to look at him to earn the retort, "Well, if she's able to accomplish such a task while pregnant due to seawater baths, then who am I to call it foolishness? Perhaps some of my own youthful vigor can be recovered in this tub of ocean swill, too." October 3rd, 1862. Yesterday, our twins were born. They came early in the morning with barely enough time for Anna to arrive. I have never seen such an easy birth. Before I get in the details, I must make mention that Mattis has not returned home yet, although he was due several weeks past. These shipping excursions are never precise since so much depends on the weather. Delays can be caused as much by storms as by lack of wind or poor wind direction. But I know that he will be making every effort to come home, knowing that his firstborn children were to arrive at the end of September. We do try not to worry when Mattis is delayed. It happens often, as there are always storms happening in the North Sea and the Baltic. Mattis is as good a captain as any and does whatever possible to be home. I am not convinced Sybellen sees this, as she becomes so melancholic when he is away. The poor girl, who barely strings 2 words together most days, complains about Mattis being late more than any other subject I've heard uttered since I've known her. This morning I woke up to the sound of the front door. In our small house, no one can leave without announcing it to the rest of the inhabitants. I glanced over the edge of the loft and saw Sybellen's large shape go outside, presumably to relieve herself. It occurred to me to check on her that morning for whatever reason, and a good thing I did. Emun awoke as I was getting out of bed, and I told him that Sybellen had gone outside and I was going to check in on her. Without being asked, he suggested that he alert Anna. I told him not to worry, for there had been no specific warning signs as of yet. I was wrong about that, as I discovered when I made my way towards the door. Before I could put on my shoes, my bare foot detected something wet on the floor. There was a trail of moisture that could only mean that Sybellen had either spilled a glass of water from her bedroom to the door, or her water had broken. So I told Emun to get Anna after all, and he was out of bed faster than a man his age has any right to move. I became concerned when Sybellen was not between the house and the water closet, and I was heading back to Emun when I saw her walking down the path to the ocean. I tell you, such a jarring feeling shot through my stomach when I saw her wandering away from the house. Emun came outside, mashing his hat on his head when he saw her too. We looked at one another in shock and went calling after her. Sybellen stopped and turned to look back at us. She was in labor, that much I could tell, but her face was so void of expression that I couldn't possibly interpret what she was thinking or what her intentions were. I could venture to guess that she might have been somewhat disappointed that we'd discovered her. Whatever her expression, I had no time to dwell on it. We drew her back to the house and settled her in her bed while Emun went to get Anna. I have not attended many births, only 2 others. I do not include my own, since experiencing childbirth oneself and serving another in childbirth are so different they could be completely unrelated. One birth I attended was the neighbor Paula's, who labored for a full day and gave birth successfully to a daughter. The other was my older sister, Adelaida, who died after a long and painful ordeal. I was only a young girl myself at that time and easily impressed. Naturally, I have not liked to think of it, as it put the fear into me that childbirth is a cruel and dangerous thing. What I've learned now after attending a 3rd birth is that no 2 women are alike, and that childbirth is not always a long and arduous process, unlike my own. By the time Anna and Emun arrived, the first child was already crowning. I would like to report that I kept Sybellen calm and steady during the ordeal, but it would be more fair and accurate to say that it was she who calmed me. Sometimes my daughter-in-law is truly a marvelous creature. Sybellen tackled the birth like she had done it a dozen times before. She did not complain or cry out. She simply focused on the task and did what needed to be done. While I watched this miracle with incredulity, I wondered if it was her size and strength that gave her a clear advantage at birthing. Either way, I hadn't much time to contemplate before the first son came squalling into the world. Anna tied a thread round his fat little wrist, lest we forget which twin came out first and should forever be called the eldest, and in short order his brother came out after him. We'd barely had a chance to clean them, and Sybellen was asking after their sex. We reported with joy that she'd given birth to 2 healthy baby boys. The first and eldest by a full minute came with a shock of black hair and pale skin just like hers, and the younger, darker son came with no hair at all. She opened her arms for her boys, and we settled them in. They both immediately gave suck, and then the 3 of them dozed as Anna and I cleaned up and reported to Emmen the news. When she woke, and for the first time since I'd met her, Sybellen cried over the sleeping babies. She did it soundlessly, but there seemed to be no end to the tears running down her cheeks. I dismiss it as my foolishness and perhaps prejudice, but I had the uncomfortable feeling that she was mourning rather than weeping for joy. It is nearly impossible to tell what Sybellen is feeling, which is why I'll not mention again the strange sadness that laced her expression. Instead, I shall attribute it to the absence of Mattis, and go no further with my speculations. Sybellen surprised us further by requesting that we name the boys. I asked her whether she had any preferences, and she said she had none herself, but that Mattis had been scribbling down his favorites. She directed me to the list that Mattis had tucked into his desk, and I was able to see a dozen or so names that he had selected for either sex. Assuming that the names at the top were his most favored, Emmun and I christened the eldest Emmun Jan Novak. Emmun went misty-eyed to see his son's first choice, and I will admit I felt my throat constrict myself at the gesture. Next, we selected the second name on the list for the younger brother, who will hereafter be known as Michal Ludwig Novak. Of course, Emmun and I are overjoyed and can hardly wait for Mattis to meet his sons. I am a grandmother, and praise be to God for 2 healthy grandbabies. October 12th, 1862. I am pleased to report that Mattis arrived home last night when his sons were 8 days old. His arrival did not come a moment too soon, for Sybellen was growing ever more melancholic. She has been an ever-increasing cause of worry for both Emmun and me, so it is with great relief that I can write that Sybellen is the happiest I have seen her since she first found out she was with child. To see my son with his 2 infant boys cradled in his arms at the same time has brought my heart close to bursting with love. I am resolved to forgive Sybellen her oddities for the happiness that she has given to my family. A woman who could birth such beautiful creatures should be thoroughly cherished. October 4th, 1863. It has been a year since I last wrote, and indeed it was only the passing of my grandson's first birthday that reminded me of my duty to report back to you from time to time. What a year it has been! 1 child means constant doings, and it seems 2 means 3 times that. Don't ask me to explain my calculations, for I know they are faulty, but never have I been so in demand or kept so busy from morning until night. It seems that babies bring the gift of memory lapse with them as well, because I barely remember my life before Emmun Jr., the elder, and Michal, the younger. My grandsons are surely the most precocious ever born, and twins though they are, could any 2 boys be more unlike? Emmun Jr. is like his mother in every way. His shock of black hair has only thickened since his birth. His skin is of the most porcelain color, while his eyes are the color of the sea on a bright sunny day. He is quiet and thoughtful, taking everything in around him with such a serious expression. Not all children are carefree, for it seems Emmun Jr. has taken the weight of the world, or at least the weight of his own mother's melancholy, upon himself, even at the tender age of 1. While I feel such a deep love for him, I do not understand his contemplative heaviness. It is very difficult to make him laugh, although when it is accomplished it surely is the most gladding sound in the whole world. He is very attached to his mother, not wanting to be away from her side for a moment. Michal is in every way like his father. His skin is darker, his hair a chestnut brown, and his ruddy cheeks project good health and appetite. His big brown eyes pierce my heart the way his father's did when he was a lad. Michal is full of life and curiosity. He laughs at everything and chatters constantly, loving the sound of his own voice. Sometimes I feel that I have been given the opportunity to go back in time and experience my own son as a babe again. So much the same they appear. He is not afraid to go far from Sybellen, even though he's only just learned to walk. He's explored every corner of the house and the yard already, and I can see that there will be a time to come when he is running us all around and straight into our gray hairs. Not that I've any left of color, mind you. Our home is full, Mattis says too full, once more of the sounds of little children, and every day they do something new to fill me with wonder. It is only now that I've had a moment to write when they are both asleep, and I am nearly asleep myself, that I remember what this house sounds like when all is silent. February 8th, 1864. I am willing to admit it now. Mattis has been saying it for nearly a year, and I've been fighting him on it at every turn. But he is right. Our house is far too small for our family. It seems we are constantly under one another. There is never a moment of privacy or peace with the goings-on of the boys and the comings and goings of men inquiring after Mattis for this and that, even though he has an office near the harbor. I found a full house a pleasure, while the boys could only crawl. But they have now long been running, not just walking, and my house feels like a circus. While Mattis is on commission, it makes sense for Sybellen and the boys to stay with us, and we've managed thus far. But for the times when Mattis is home, I swear I can hear the very boards of our home creaking with the strain. So when Mattis said again just last week that he'd be looking at buying a new house, I finally let the comment pass without protest. I know when I am beaten. Emun suggested tearing down our house and rebuilding, and I nearly threw a frying pan at him. This house is not to be torn down, not ever. And with my feelings made clear, Emun and Mattis went to market for a house. I do not know the details around my son's fortune. I only know it has been growing steadily. I realized it fully when we went down to the harbor to christen the latest ship for his fleet. Mattis had told me he had commissioned another ship over a year ago, but I'd forgotten all about it and certainly did not realize he had such a grand ship in mind. When I saw it, I came to understand just how successful my son has become. We attended the christening of the ship, which was of course named after Sybellen. Mattis proudly showed us above and below decks as the ship sat in the harbor with the crowd around her and music playing on the wharf. I have never been aboard such a beautiful vessel. Indeed, I've hardly been aboard so much as a rowboat, but I do know a fine ship when I see one. For the sake of posterity, I must tell you that I have never seen the like. She, for it seems that the men always refer to their vessels as female, was built at the shipping yard outside of Gdansk, and was sitting in the water when I first saw her. I must say she was simply glorious, all curves and crisp white sails that had yet to see a day's wind set into them. Even the ship's wheel was remarkable and unique, having been crafted after the ornate likeness of Celtic knots. I assume Mattis may have seen such a design on his journey to Ireland. Mattis proudly walked us through the captain's quarters, which is large enough to accommodate 4, and which he had elegantly equipped with its own water closet and bathtub. The kitchen galley makes my own kitchen look like a closet, but I suppose this ship needs it to keep as many as 70 men fed and watered. He showed us the men's sleeping quarters, the belly of the ship where the goods and fresh water are stored, and the gun decks equipped with 8 cannons. It made me very nervous to think of their purpose. I cannot repeat all of the parts of the ship I was shown, for it seems that sailors like to give a name to every slab of wood. But I was comforted to see 6 large rowboats lashed in place should the men need to vacate the ship. The item that was the most breathtaking and artful was the wooden sculpture that was fastened to the front of the ship under the bowsprit. Mattis says it is called the masthead. It is a creature of folklore, a woman who is human above the waist and fish below. It is clear as day that the mermaid's image was carved in likeness of Sybellen, and what a likeness it is! There is no mistaking whose face graces the front of the vessel. I have never seen Sybellen angry before. with Mattis or anyone else. She can be dour, but never have I seen a display of temper towards anyone or anything. Until today. The masthead was a surprise for her, you see, and one that no one should be too shocked to learn of, for the ship itself is named for her. Far from being honored, she was furious, and no one was more surprised and disappointed at this than Mattis. I am grateful, at least, that in her rage she did not choose to have it out with Mattis in front of everyone on the docks, but withheld until she pulled him into the captain's quarters for privacy. This happened during our tour, and the rest of us went onto the deck to pretend that nothing was amiss. I heard the sounds of raised voices, but couldn't make out what was being said. It was then that I noticed the strange timbre of my daughter-in-law's voice. I do not begrudge Mattis the deep love he has for his wife. That is as it should be. I know I long ago stepped down as the first lady of my son's heart. I am simply uncertain of the appropriateness of the mythical creature on top of which Sybellen's face has been set. I'm well aware of men's tastes for a bonny, bare-breasted lass to grace the front of their ship. I have even heard of other more fearsome creatures being used for ships of war, which is all in keeping. I only hope that there is not some hidden blasphemy in the sculpture that might offend God and bring bad luck down upon our heads. They must have resolved their difference somehow, since neither of them has mentioned the argument, and the masthead has stayed in place. When they emerged from the captain's quarters, both of them were flushed, but seemed relatively at peace. But I digress. I meant for this entry to inform you that we are now on the market for a new house, and it ended up being entirely about the addition to the growing collection of Novak sailing vessels. And now I have exhausted my hand, and shall lay my quill to rest for another day when I have more news to report on our new home or otherwise. July 14th, 1864. Who am I to think that a grandmother should have some say in what is or is not safe for her grandsons? Mattis has gotten it into his head that the boys who are not yet even 2 will be needing horses to ride. Simply because the house, nay, manor, for it's so large a home I should be too embarrassed to describe it, that he has purchased for us has stables. Must they be filled? We've never been a horsing family, and I see no reason to start now. But at the fair today, Michal was simply taken by a white gelding, and Mattis nearly bought it on the spot. If it weren't for our protests, mine and Sybellen's, I do believe he would have had the boy up in saddle and gallivanting down the road like a highwayman. For once, it seems, my daughter-in-law and I reside on the same side of good sense, although I suspect her preferences had less to do with the belief that the boys are simply too young, and more to do with her own taste. She's never seen the appeal of horses, nor displayed an interest in any animals, save birds and fishes. Either way, I'll take her as my ally in this fight against insanity. It is interesting to note that once again, Emmon Jr. mirrors his mother in his disinterest for horses. He saw the white beast at the same time as his brother, but while Michal was all squeals of delight, Emmon Jr. gave an expression of disdain as he sat cuddled in his mother's arms. You could have painted the two of them into a fine fresco, a Madonna and child, and used precisely the same expression of sleepy calm. Whatever their preferences, we have managed to dodge the danger of a raving stallion crashing round in our stables and threatening to kick off the heads of my grandsons, at least for the time being. I suspect I've won the battle, but not the war. At least I have time to pray that the boys will have mastered the skill of feeding themselves and tying their own shoelaces before their hard-headed father sticks them on the back of a war-horse. August 12, 1864. The renovations on our house, castle, are well underway, and I've rarely seen Emmon and Mattis in such high spirits. I have little interest in the details, other than to ensure that every day they're fed and watered properly for their labors. It's a big job they've undertaken to get the manor ready for living in. Mattis spends part of his days working with Emmon and overseeing the carpenters they have hired and the other part at the shipping office. Between these activities, I have hardly seen my son all summer. He reluctantly contracted a captain for this past spring's commission, for which I am overjoyed. I hope that he chooses to do so more often in future, although he says that it costs the company much more to have someone else captain the Sybellen, and has warned Sybellen and me to not get used to the idea. He also has some anxiety about trusting the prized ship to someone else, but I think he realizes that sooner or later he will have to share the workload. I think in several years he will find himself in the office full-time rather than captaining, and I can hardly wait for those days. The manor is outside the village and perhaps a half-hour's walk from our house, which in comparison looks more and more like a shack with a broken back. On one hand, I am excited to be moving into such a glorious residence, and on the other I have anxiety on all fronts. What will the village think? That we've gotten above ourselves with all this wealth? After all, Emmon was a carpenter, and he came from a family of carpenters, generations of them. It is only Mattis who's changed the fortunes of the Novak family, and has done so against all odds. I am unsure how I will feel with the seemingly endless rooms. How does one choose where to spend one's time? Mattis has informed me that he intends to fill the manor with staff and to live like a proper, noble family, even though we are not noble. He has set aside large rooms for each of us, which is how he reports nobility lives. It seems excessive to me that we should each have our own enormous space and massive bed, not to mention assistance in dressing every morning. I have secretly asked my husband if we can continue to share a room, since I've no wish to offend my son, and my darling seemed relieved that I feel the same way he does. Mattis says that I'll no longer have to do the cooking and the washing up, and I can pursue other things. But what? I have no idea, for I have no hobbies to speak of aside from this diary and helping to raise my grandsons. Perhaps gardening? I could hardly tell you a rose from a daisy, but the gardens at the manor are extensive, and I can only imagine all the work required to be kept beautiful. Mattis says he'll hire a gardener too, but I have asked him for the charge of it to start with. I know something about growing herbs and vegetables at least. It is merely the ornamental gardening about which I am daft. Sybellen seems disinterested in the manor and all the goings-on there. I have asked her if she is looking forward to moving into the home, but she shrugs and says it just means more rooms to chase the boys through. Once again, Sybellen and I find something upon which to agree. She knows that Mattis has another commission coming up in the fall, and this one he'll be captaining. Autumn is never the ideal time to be sailing, but it must be done, as this one is for the government. There is a marked drop in the lightness of her demeanor whenever his disembarking date draws nigh. You can see it surely as a set of perfectly weighted scales. March 4th, 1866. It's been years since my last entry, and were I not so busy and full with things to do, I should feel ashamed of being neglectful. Mattis is gone on commission, and I write because weather of the kind we've been having makes me restless when I know Mattis is out in it. I can only hope he is far from the effects of it, for tonight there is a most wretched of storm moving in from across the Baltic. On nights like this, I wish we were not a seafaring family, but had elected for a life much further inland, perhaps farming. We are safely tucked into our new home, and nearly every room has a crackling fire or hot ceramic furnace, and yet the place seems hollow when Mattis is away. Sybellen is nearly unbearable in her sadness, and the boys, especially Emmon Jr., can feel their mother's discontent, which in turn makes them grumpy. This is the most dangerous time of year for Mattis to be at sea. His hiring of a captain while the house renovations were underway seems a cruel tease now that he is gone again. I would happily trade this fine house filled with foreign furniture and artwork to have my son home during these days. As I write this, there are branches tapping against the walls of the house, and there is nothing to be seen out the window save blackness and driving rain. Sybellen sits in her room with the fire crackling in the fireplace, and the boys playing on the carpet at her feet. She most often elects to sit on the window seat and look out at the sea, although what she can possibly see on a night like this is beyond me. I write this evening from our own quarters. Emmon sits snoring in front of the fireplace with a book upside down on his chest and his spectacles perched on the end of his nose. I cannot decide whether to wake him and tell him of the peculiar conversation I had with Sybellen just hours ago. I had gone in to check on her since I had not seen her or the boys for several hours, and the storm was getting worse. I knew she would be in a state of worry for Mattis, and I was not wrong. I found her sitting with her feet pulled up under her. She has the strangest way of resting sometimes, certainly not how proper ladies were trained to sit, even poor ones like me, on the seat in her bay window. My grandsons, who are now 3.5 years old, were playing with a set of wooden blocks in front of the fire with our nanny, Carolina, a recent addition that I am unsure is worth the expense. I sat with Sybellen a while before I had gotten up the nerve to ask her why she was so down at the mouth. Mattis is an expert seaman, and would surely be managing the weather as well as anybody could. She said that was not it exactly. Yes, of course she worries about Mattis when he sails long journeys, especially in winter, but it was more the direction her life had taken that was weighing on her. I was shocked to hear this, and fought the urge to slap her ungrateful mouth in that moment, until I realized that she was philosophizing, not complaining about her material goods and way of life. I asked her to explain what she meant, as it was hard to understand how a beautiful woman with 2 lovely sons and a loving and wealthy husband could give her cause for such unhappiness. It was then that she looked me full in the face with such an expression of yearning that my breath caught in my throat. You must understand, dear reader, that Sybellen rarely looks anyone in the eye. Most often she avoids conversation entirely, but when she deigns to engage, she keeps her eyes averted. She said to me, "You see, Mamma, I wished for a daughter, as plain as day." In her eyes I could see that the woman was missing a part of her heart that sons, for whatever reason, could not fill. Such a confusion of emotions filled me then. Anger that she could so take her beautiful boys for granted, and sadness that her secret desire had gone unfulfilled, although this latter feeling was swiftly squashed, for what would keep her from having another child? I asked her then why she did not try again, but her eyes unlocked themselves from my face and went back to the sea. "You don't understand," she said, seeming to speak more to herself than to me. "I would have to go away for a long time to have another chance." "Well, you're right," I answered. "I don't understand. What do you mean?" That was the wrong thing to say, because she dismissed herself, and there it ended. I don't know if she would have opened up to me if I had been gentler with her, but her words seemed so devoid of sense that I lost patience, and with it my chance to understand. I never had a daughter either, and having lived in a house full of men for most of my life perhaps means that I no longer understand my own sex, their complicated wants and desires. But I do not think it is that. I think it is simply that my daughter-in-law is of mysterious origin and of a mysterious people, and perhaps she has strange customs of which I have never heard. So many times I have wondered why my son chose such a woman. Why could he not have chosen a nice local girl with which to settle down? I go to sleep with a heavy heart tonight, but trust that, as always, things will look better in the morning. April 12, 1866. Mattis arrived home 2 weeks ago and told us tonight that he'll be leaving again in July. Sybellen left the table without a word and went to her rooms. My heart is too heavy to write more tonight, dear reader, but I felt I had to make the occasion, so I did not forget. My one comfort has come to be found in the gardens, in which I have surprisingly found solace and pleasure. It is there that I go now, with a new shipment of bulbs from Utrecht. October 4th, 1866. My wonderful grandsons had their 4th birthday yesterday. Their father was notably absent. We had a simple celebration with sweet treats and games with a few local children and mothers. I dare say many of the villagers wanted to have the excuse to see the Novak manor for themselves, as some of those in attendance were ones I know to have made biting comments about us since we've come into good fortune. But I won't be ungenerous and say more about those, for I'm thankful that there are many in the village and surrounding area that have supported Mattis and his enterprise since the beginning, and are sincere in their congratulations on his success. Mattis is once again late to arrive and has missed his son's birthday. It is never as joyous an occasion as it is when he is here. The boys have gone from missing their father to an expectation that he will be away from home more than he will be in it, which is a sad reality in our present time. The blessing of growth and financial success never comes without a heavy price, it seems. The boys are growing in their own directions, and the differences between them are ever growing too. Emun Jr. grows more like his mother every day, while Michal more like his father. They are both beautiful boys, but when I take them out into the village, we are constantly told that it is hard to believe they are brothers. They are so unlike. I have to agree with these tiresome comments, for if I had not been at their birth myself, I would scarcely believe it. Sybellen has become a daily worry for me, as I have seen her lose weight and have noticed that she is often absent from the manor at the strangest hours. There are as many meals that she is not present at than meals that she is, but when she attends she eats like one starving. Her increased appetite and weight loss seem to suggest a life of too much activity, but I will be stuffed if I can figure out what she has been up to. When she is not absent or eating her weight in food, which goes right through her, she is sleeping for hours on end, leaving the care of the boys to me and Carolina. She comes and goes like a ghost, and always with sadness of expression. I have promised myself to watch her movements more closely, and if necessary, bring her behavior to the attention of the doctor. The woman is a source of endless curiosity and worry for me, and it seems this has only increased of lately. October 6th, 1866. Mattis arrived home yesterday, and not a minute too soon. Sybellen's depression has become very. I'd brought it to his attention tonight after dinner. He listened as I told him how things had been for her since he'd been gone so often, and I do believe he heard me. He did not offer any solution, for indeed this quandary will require some careful thought on his part, but I felt assured that he took me at my word. Sybellen may not be happy with me for my interference, but I am beyond caring at this point, since she is affecting the mood of the whole manor, not the least of which are my grandsons. Mattis said he would speak with her, and so we shall soon see what will come of it. October 10th, 1866. Begging your pardon, but curse this meddling grandmother for a fool. Why did I ever open my mouth? It seems Mattis and Sybellen have discussed the problem of Mattis' absence at length, and come to a disruptive decision without consulting myself or Emun. I should have suspected something ridiculous when I saw Sybellen smile for the first time in months. My heart, which was at first light when I saw her countenance, quickly plummeted as matters were made clear over dinner. I can hardly believe the misjudgment that has resulted, and I have resolved to stitch my own mouth shut with my crochet hook from now on. Mattis has decided that he will be taking Sybellen and the boys with him on his next commission. They are set to disembark next April. He has already published the announcement to his company, as well as the date of departure in the trade journals. I feel right and truly betrayed. Mattis chattered gaily over dinner, wondering why it had not occurred to him before, and I volunteered that perhaps because a seafaring ship is no place for women and children. He retorted that was nonsense, since families travel across the sea all the time, even as far as North America across the Atlantic. We had a lively row over this when I called him foolhardy and selfish. Sybellen watched all of this with perceptive eyes, but ventured no opinion at all, even when I asked her how she felt about taking her boys to sea with them. She simply said she was not afraid of the ocean. Mattis added that they hit so many ports for delivery purposes that the boys would hardly have to stay aboard for longer than a few weeks at a time. I must admit that I left the dinner table in anger and before dessert was served because I could not bear to listen to any more. Even my own husband sided with them and said that if families did it all the time, then why should they not? They were to sail the most sturdy and sound vessel known to the Baltic, so why should the boys not experience life at sea and stay with their parents the way that boys should? I could have smacked him. Now that I've had a few hours to cool down, I find I feel no less disappointment over the whole decision, but I am calm enough to recognize that my emotions are rooted more in the fear of how much I'll miss my grandsons when they're abroad than fear for their safety. I still do not think a sailing vessel, and a working one at that, filled with men and cargo and ropes and holds, is a good place for children. I am acquainted with the layout of the Sybellen and can take some small comfort in knowing that they are to share the captain's quarters, which are broad and comfortable. I also have several months to prepare for their departure, but I must be honest and lay bare my heavy heart. I am distraught at this decision, which was made without my consultation, and feel a loosening of my grip on hearth and home. Why must things always change? Would that I could keep my grandson small and safe and with me always. And so you will see, too, that indeed I have become a sentimental old woman. I will not deny it. It seems to be the destiny of mothers that the little ones we have held close to our hearts and watched grow are only being prepared to one day leave us behind. August 1st, 1867. I write only because I have not written in so long. I have not had the heart for it. My grandsons have been gone for 5 long months, and though the sun is warming the air with its heat and the birds are singing, I gain no joy from my favorite season. I only await the day that my grandchildren return and I can once again hear their laughter through the halls and rooms of this mansion. Emon bears up under the absence of our family much better than I, although I know he misses them too. He keeps busy doing nothing, or so it appears to me, meeting with his friends in the village or puttering in the yards. They are scheduled to return this fall, as Mattis generally does. They plan to dock no later than early October and to spend the winter here. I can truthfully say that I have never looked forward to winter so much as I do now. We had a letter from them which arrived end of June. They report good health and clear sailing, and at the time of writing to be ahead of schedule, so that is of some small condolence. Emon Jr. has taken to sailing with the heart of a master sailor, writes his father. Michal, meanwhile, has been plagued by bouts of seasickness. Once again my darling boys prove themselves opposites. Sybellen is in her element, he reports. Nothing cures her discontent like sea air. They have decided that the whole affair has been such a success that he is likely to take Sybellen and the boys with him on a more regular basis, only over the summers. At this news my heart has sunk into my shoes. So Emon and I are truly to be forgotten then, for what value do grandparents give to their grandchildren? Clearly, none. Emon tells me not to be silly, that this is the life Mattis has chosen and the reason we live so finely now, but I have come to resent this life and crave a simpler time. I shall amuse myself with my gardening and sewing projects until their arrival, and though I was never much of a reader in my early years, I have taken to enjoying the occasional novel on rainy days. I have recently finished Wives and Daughters by English writer Elizabeth Gaskell, and have set my sights on a book of poetry next by an American writer named Alfred Tennyson, both of which have been translated into Polish by a friend of mine in Gdansk. Thankfully, the endless supply of translated works is serving as a good distraction. September 31st, 1867. I am happy to report my grandsons have returned. Indeed, they have been home for 2 weeks now, which is the earliest Mattis has ever returned from a commission in the fall. My heart is full to have my family home safe again. How the boys have grown in the months they've been away. They have both stretched up and become weather-worn, though I would have expected Emon Jr. to have a darker complexion. It seems even his mother has not changed a shade since she left too. Michal and Mattis, on the other hand, are as brown as natives, and their hair has lightened to a shade of yellow. Michal looks hale and hearty, but when I asked him how he enjoyed sailing, he said not at all, that it makes his guts turn inside out. Emon Jr., however, lights up like a firework when I ask him about the sea. He says he wants to do what Papa does when he grows up. He also said that he wants to marry a woman like Mama, and I'd not the heart to disenchant him of the realities of that idea. Sybellen arrived home as happy as I have ever seen her, and in spite of my wishes not to have my family away from me for so long, I am glad to see that it has benefited her and Mattis in the way that they had hoped. I just wished for myself that it had not been quite the raging success that it was. I have asked what they plan to do about Mihal's seasickness, and Mattis has put off answering for now, as he says he has winter activities to focus before they have to decide about next summer's commission. He says his office is flooded with requests, and he needs to hire additional staff to handle the demand, as well as to oversee the building of yet another ship. He is bouncy and light-hearted when his business is doing well, and this in turn makes the whole house feel full of joy. February 17th, 1868. Heavens, it has been a hard winter. I do not remember such a biting cold in all my years, and such a quantity of snow and lack of sunshine, for it seems every day finds dreary clouds drifting in from the icy sea to cover us over and hide the light from our pale faces. Sybellen, who was so happy in the fall after returning from the summer commission, has fallen into such a depression, the likes of which I have never before seen. Most baffling about it is that Mattis is home, so it cannot be his absence that is making her so melancholic. I have asked Mattis to request the doctor to come see her, but his only remark is that he does not believe a doctor can help her. I neglected to write in January that I ran into her in the hallway late one night when I got up to use the water closet. Her hair was wet, and her nightdress was damp. I could not imagine why she would take to bathing at this hour, so I asked her what she was doing. She said, "I'm going to bed, Mama," and walked on before I could inquire further. This strange behavior spooks me, I am not ashamed to admit. I am accustomed to some of her unusual habits, but this is extreme in its oddness, even for the likes of my daughter-in-law. But today, an even stranger and more upsetting thing took place. Mattis was out at the stables with the boys and Emmon, and I was on my way out the door to return 3 novels to my friend, when I realized I had forgotten one at my bedside table and went back to retrieve it. I had to pass by Sybellen's room, and as I did, I heard the sound of weeping. This in itself is a surprise, since I have seen Sybellen cry before, and she has always cried silently. She must have been suffering horribly to make such a sound. I knocked gently on the door and asked if I could enter. The sound of weeping stopped immediately, but she did not answer at once. I asked again if I could come in, and she said that I would not be able to. Not knowing what she meant, I turned the knob only to find that the door was locked. When I asked her why her door was locked, she said in her infuriating way that it was to keep her in. When I asked her to unlock it at once, she said that she could not because she didn't have the key. Goodness gracious! At this I was lost for words for a moment before asking who had locked her in. I could not have been more surprised at her answer than if she had walked straight through the door and shown to be a ghost. "Mattis," she answered. My blood ran cold and I begged her to be lying. When she did not answer, I ran to get the skeleton key. I returned and unlocked the door and found her sitting on the floor in her nightdress still, this being mid-afternoon, and with a handkerchief as wet as though she had dunked it in a pail of water. She was in such a state, it was as though both her boys and Mattis had suddenly gone up in smoke, and all she held dear had been stolen from her in a breath. When I asked her to explain, she simply told me not to be angry at Mattis, for he locked her in at her own request. I could not get out of her why she would ask him such a thing, and I am afraid that I begin to fear for my daughter-in-law's sanity. When we had a private moment, I confronted Mattis about it, and he confirmed that she had asked him to lock her in, just for the day. He brushed off the strangeness of the request and my astonishment for agreeing to do such a thing. He told me to mind my own business and leave them to themselves. "She is very sad, Mama," was all he would say by way of explanation. "Well, clearly," I responded. "How happy can a wife be when her husband locks her in her bedroom?" When I asked him if it had to do with not having a daughter, he seemed startled for a moment that I should know such a thing, and asked me how I knew. I told him that Sybellen had told me of her heart's desire a few years ago. He did not confirm one way or the other if it was the reason for her turn today, but rather gave me a hug and told me not to worry, that he would take care of her as best he could. He said that his love would cure her, and his belief in that seemed resolute. Never have I felt so unsettled, so confused, so worried about my family. And though I know it does no good to bemoan the past, I find myself wishing so much that Mattis had found a different kind of woman. Since wishing is a useless exercise, then I shall lean to prayer. April 5th, 1869. Mattis and Sybellen are preparing for another journey. I dread their departure as always, but it has been such a miserable winter for Sybellen, particularly, that I am nearly eager for the date to arrive. She has become unbearable. Nothing has improved since my last entry, although I do believe Mattis has left off locking the piteous creature in her bedroom. I am loath to report that truly I believe things to have deteriorated in Sybellen's mind in only a few short months. She is absent from the manor much of the time, always returning by way of the beach paths, so I can only guess that she has spent the day near the ocean, taking whatever comfort she finds there. I have begun to be quite worried when she is away for long stretches at a time, and since Mattis is on a short commission with the Gus, a smaller vessel than the Sybellen, he has not been here to witness her behavior and the abandonment of her boys, for it appears to me that she has all but completely lost interest in them as well. Michal seems to bear up well enough under my care and the care of Karolina and his tutors, but poor Emun Jr. continuously asks after his mother. And why should he not? They are not yet 8 years old. He is at a loss to understand the depression and state of apathy in which his mother finds herself. Her appearance has changed notably as well, though I hesitate to recount the specifics because sometimes I am not sure I can believe my eyes. She no longer cares for her long black hair, servicing it and having coiffed by her lady's maid as she used to. Instead, she lets it stay long and unrestrained, giving her a wild appearance, which is only accentuated by the feverish look her blue eyes have taken on. The blue of her eyes has always been beautiful to look upon, but now seems to have taken a molten cast, for lack of a better word, and I have never seen eyes so brightly lit from within. Her skin has always been pale, no matter the hours she takes in the sun. I recall warning her to spend less time under the sun's glare in the early days, but she never heeded me, and I recall thinking that she would be freckled and dark as a heathen before long. But I was wrong. Even now it retains its porcelain color. Only it too has also changed, but in a way I am at a loss to describe accurately. It has a kind of iridescence to it that can only be seen in the light. I made a private study of her the last time I came upon her coming up from the beach paths in her usual way, with her hair damp and blowing in the wind and her clothing haphazard. I found myself in a sort of daze as I took in her appearance, as though I could not look away. It frightened me, as did the expression on her face, such a mournful brokenness. I have not spoken to her again of her desire for a daughter. I am afraid to broach the subject for fear it would send her further into whatever hell she finds herself in. I took the liberty to call upon Dr. Wozniak for advice, but he says that female problems of emotion are not his specialty. He said he would write to a friend and colleague from America who may be able to provide some enlightenment, but so far I have heard nothing. As for the upcoming journey, I was in discussions with Mattis before he disembarked on this latest commission. Mattis has agreed to keeping Michal here, since he suffers horrible seasickness whenever he steps foot on a boat. This is my one bright spot during these days, knowing that I can keep one grandson here with me. I feared we would have great repercussions from Sybellen, as Mattis and I had discussed this in her absence, but Mattis advised me to leave off talking with her about it. Since then, it has never come up again, neither from his lips nor hers. I find myself fearful that she may bring it up at some point before they leave, But the date is fast approaching, and there has been no adjustment to the plan to allow Michal to stay. And so I wait humbly for a good doctor to reply and enlighten us, for my family to disembark, and for peace to descend upon this household once more. May 18th, 1869. My world has come to an end, and there will never be another moment of happiness, so long as I shall live. December 2nd, 1870. It has been well over a year since my last entry. I have not had the heart to write of the events that have befallen my family, for they have been too awful to bear and too awful for words. Since I cannot form the words myself, I shall leave it to this passage I found recently while reading a tragic play. We are destined to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing, end them. With whomever preaches of free will I take great exception, because I, in my life, have experienced very little of it. I did not choose to be born a woman. I did not choose to marry my emun, my father arranged it. I did not choose the sex of my child, or to stop at only one. That too was determined for me. I did not choose my country, my city, my face or hands or form, my intellect and talents or lack thereof. And whether I choose corn for my supper over peas, or a blue dress over a green one, is so petty and inconsequential that it cannot possibly be named free will. I did not choose my son's wife for him, and I did not choose my grandson's. They came to us as a gift from God, and now one has been taken back, along with my own son and many good men alongside. But I digress into sentimental musings to avoid putting down on paper the horrors of the past year. So I'll get to task now so you can understand. In May of last year, May 17th to be precise, Mattis and Sybellen were preparing to embark on their summer commission, to take Emun Jr. with them and leave Michal at home. But I get ahead of myself. In order to understand the following events, I must tell you of what led up to them. I have written before of Sybellen's melancholy and strange behavior. You may recall I asked Dr. Wozniak for advice, and he wrote to his friend to appeal for insight. I received a letter from a Dr. Anders at St. Peter's Psychological Institution in Boston, a place so far away and strange to me that it seems like it must be another world. Dr. Anders had very little helpful to say since he was not here to examine her, but he advised a tincture of herbs for her to help lift her spirits, as well as plenty of rest and sunshine, and broth of vegetables. He also recommended that we take her to an institution in Gdansk for examination. Since the date of their departure was so near, I resolved to talk to Mattis about this option for Sybellen, but only upon their return in the fall. I was hoping that the trip abroad would prove a cure for her, and the sordid business might cure itself. But on May 16th, two events came together to form our ruin. One was that a sudden spring storm blew in from across the sea. Storms are unusual for May, but they can happen. Throughout the day the winds were whipped up and the sky became a dark mass of boiling clouds. Also in the morning, Sybellen did not join us for breakfast. I went up to her rooms to see if she was all right, but she was not there, and neither did her bed show that she had slept. At first I assumed that she had slept in Mattis' rooms and went to check there, but Sybellen was not to be found there either. I went back to the breakfast room to ask Mattis when he saw her last, and he answered that he had seen her the night before. They had said good night and parted to their own rooms. When I told him what I had discovered, that Sybellen had not slept in her own room, he became instantly fearful, much more so than I am accustomed, Mattis being, even when things go amiss. He and Emun Sr. immediately set off to search the beach and the beach paths for her, as we all thought for certain she would be there. I waited with the boys for their return and watched the skies darken with a sense of foreboding. It seemed they were mirroring the day's events. Only Emun Sr. returned from the search, and he reported that Mattis was going to get a boat to search the water. This talk frightened me greatly, and I feared the worst for Sybellen. Why did he think he needed a boat to find her? Could they not simply take several men and continue to search the beaches? Had her depression and her attraction to the ocean collided to bring tragedy? What was he imagining? It wasn't until the afternoon, by which time the storm had whipped itself into a frenzy, that I learned what Mattis intended when he had told Emon he was going out to search the waters. I was sitting and reading with Emon Jr. and Michal when Mattis came into the room. He was wet through and dripping from the rain. He said he was there to take the boys because surely Sybellen would come if she heard their voices. I did not understand what he meant. It made no sense to involve the children. "You cannot possibly understand, Mama," he pleaded with me at first. When I asked him to enlighten me, he spoke sharply, saying, "There isn't time. Every moment more we risk to lose her forever." His wild-eyed expression frightened me even further. The boys became frightened too, to see their father in such a state, and I tried to send him away to calm down. He would not listen, and tried to compel the boys to come with him, but I told the boys to stay put. The poor children were becoming more frightened and confused by the moment. Mattis told them that their mother was missing, and that he needed the help to find her. Once he had said that, there was no stopping Emon Jr., who jumped up and took his father's hand. I tried to reason with Mattis, tried to convince him that to take the boys out, and in fact to go out at all on a night like this, was surely dangerous. But he would not listen, and left the house in a hurry with Emon Jr. Michal and I huddled together to wait. Little did I know that that was the last time I was to see Mattis or Emon Jr. Emon Sr. arrived home an hour later, also dripping and wet to the bone. He had been down at the docks having his own row with our son, and he reported angrily to me that Mattis had taken the Sybellen and 29 men with him, barely enough to sail a ship of such size. I nearly fainted for the shock of it. Why had he taken the Sybellen? Emon could not explain, and he said that Mattis had left with much haste, proclaiming that the sooner they left, the more likely they would be to find her. After that, it was as though the storm knew that my son was challenging it, and it had an appetite to swallow him whole. Never before and never since have I seen a storm on the Baltic such as the one that took the lives of those on the Sybellen that night. Oh, the foolishness, the sickening waste. Michal slept, as children seem blessed with the ability to maintain some kind of normalcy even in the midst of the strange. But neither Emon nor I went to bed that night. Early in the morning, as the storm was finally cooling, Emon went to the harbor to wait. But the Sybellen did not return. That day I found a lump of heavy damp cloth at the door beside the kitchens and held it up to see that it was one of Sybellen's dresses, in fact the one that I had last seen her wearing. What it was doing there I could not imagine, until Emon later told me that they had found the sodden clothing in the rocks down at the beach. He considered it a sure sign that Sybellen had walked into the ocean to drown herself in her misery, although why she felt compelled to remove the clothing to accomplish her goal was a mystery. Surely it would only have helped to pull her under, Emon wondered aloud. "Listen to us," I replied angrily. "What talk we have been brought to." If that was the case and she wished to drown herself, then surely her body would wash up on the beach. Why did Mattis have to take to the sea in a ship if she had drowned? I implored him further. It did not make sense. Had my son taken leave of his senses too? Had his grief and worry overcome logic? The searching, for Sybellen or her namesake, went on for weeks afterward, and Emon and I barely slept or ate. But we did not see even a shadow of the Sybellen. Even now, not so much as a broken board has washed up on the beach. There have been no bodies drifting in on the tides, at least not in our area, and day by day our hope has faded into dust. We had hoped for a time for reports from other ships that came and went from our port, but there has been no word. After the tragedy, Emon dealt with the insurance agents. For a time we believed that we would lose the claim, as there were some factors that were not consistent with the commission when the insurance was set up. But Emon worked quickly and said what he needed to say in order to save Novak shipping from destruction. I was so lost in my agony that I did not follow what he was doing, although I vaguely remember him trying to explain to me that he had to hold a secret meeting with all of the company's sailors who were not on the vessel the night it left, in order to solidify Novak's position with the insurance. Otherwise, all would be lost. The newspapers have had their fun with the story that Emon had to concoct for them in order to be consistent with the insurance claim. Emon has protected me from the reporters and the curious villagers, and it seems that, thankfully, the story has been eclipsed by other news. I believe I have intentionally closed my ears and eyes to the things pertaining to the company, as I felt I could barely manage to get out of bed, let alone consider matters of business. I do not know how Emon managed. Michal cried every night for a very long time, and I would stay with him until he cried himself into sleep. I remember wondering if there would ever be a night again where I did not bank the fire and crawl into my bed to the sound of a little boy weeping in my head. Watching him recover from losing his entire family in one moment, though, has made me realize that children are far hardier than we give them credit for. He did eventually cease the crying and was back to himself, or nearly, inside of a year. It has been Emon and myself who have aged, and I would even go so far as to say that I have sincerely wished for death at times over the past year. Were it not for Michal, I believe both Emon and I might have given up. Emon would not have bothered to fight for the insurance, and he likely would have sold the company for what little value was left after the Sybellen was gone. I knew the Sybellen was the pride of Novak shipping, but I had not realized how much worth was tied up in the vessel alone. As it was, the company passed to Michal, who is, of course, far too young to run it. Emon's two elder sisters, Marcella and Rena, both of whom live in Gdansk and have their own husbands and lives to live, have been a godsend. Emon held a meeting with them and their families to decide what to do, and the decision was unanimous. Novak shipping must not be sold or dissolved or in any other way cut up for parts. They have changed their lives to pull together, and never have I been prouder of my family. It appears that Novak shipping is now being run, how successfully I cannot say, by a collection of gray hairs, two of whom are in corsets rather than trousers. The worst of it all, though, is the lack of closure and finality. I still feel a fool's hope that one day I shall see Mattis and Emon Jr. walking up the beach path to the manor to report that yes, they had been wrecked at sea, but that they had washed up somewhere remote and had to make their way home. As for Sybellen, I have and still do feel so much anger and resentment towards her, so much confusion and hurt. But I also feel an enormous sadness for a woman who was clearly misunderstood by all of us. I feel now that no one really knew her, even Mattis, for if he had, surely he would not have taken her from whatever home she had. Surely she would have been happier to stay wherever it was she had grown up, wherever there were people like her. I wish a great many things were different, but the simple truth is that nothing can be changed through wishing or regret, so I must try to put such thoughts aside, leaving those things which are behind and press on to the things which are ahead. This simple scripture remains a comfort to me. I am not through the grief, nor do I think I ever shall be. All I can say is that for now I am able to go through each day for Michal, to focus on his future. I am not sure that I shall ever be able to laugh or smile again, or appreciate the beauty of the day around me. But I shall press on. I shall press on until God sees fit to take this old woman to be with her family again.